That day, Sam Green stayed late at work. The quarterly report was due soon, and he had to carefully check all the documents. Sam usually drove his old Ford to work, but that day, his car decided to start acting out and refused to start, so the man had to resort to taking the subway. And now, having finished the report, Sam confidently walked towards the underpass. Since rush hour had already passed, there were relatively few people there. Going down the steps, he suddenly saw a young woman standing against the wall and begging for alms. The way she looked made it clear that she belonged to the lower socioeconomic strata, and it obviously wasn't her great life that made her beg for money. Sam took a couple of steps towards the woman. The beggar's face seemed very familiar to him. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he realized who she was. "Maggie, is that really you?" the man exclaimed in surprise. The man's reaction was caused by the fact that 3 years ago, he was in a relationship with a woman named Maggie Simmons and even wanted to marry her. However, due to the intervention of Sam's mother, the young people broke up. Having heard the familiar voice, the beggar shuddered and looked sadly into Sam's eyes. Then, having mustered up her courage, she answered sadly, "Yes, Sam, it's really me. I didn't expect to see you here." At first, Sam felt like it was all just a bad dream, and as soon as he'd open his eyes, a strange vision would immediately dissolve into a ghostly haze. But no matter how many times he blinked, Maggie was still standing in the underpass, and it didn't seem like she was going to disappear. "What happened to you? Why are you begging for money?" Sam asked awkwardly. After the man's words, Maggie looked around anxiously and said, "Be quiet, don't talk so loud. If Henry hears us, we'll be in a lot of trouble." "Who's Henry? What are you talking about, Maggie? Let's go have a bite to eat at the cafe. To be honest, I'm starving," Sam said in a tone that wasn't open to objections and resolutely took the woman by the hand. Soon, the young people were already sitting in a cozy cafe and eating fresh burgers, washing them down with Diet Coke. Once they were in the safety of the cafe, Maggie relaxed visibly and told Sam her sad story. As it turned out, 2 years after graduation, something terrible happened to Maggie. The fact was that the woman's mother died of pneumonia, and she simply had no other relatives left. Unfortunately, these were far from all the trials that fate had prepared for the unfortunate Maggie, who became an orphan in an instant. The fact was that 6 months after the death of her mother, her house burned down because of faulty electrical wiring. Thus, the poor woman ended up on the street, where she was quickly noticed by the cunning businessman, Henry, who controlled all the homeless people in the area and took away part of the money they got during the day. In return, the man gave the unfortunate people some clothes and an illusory sense of protection. Maggie became one of his workers, who ended up begging for money in the underpass, just like all the other homeless people. Megan's story stirred up a storm of emotions and feelings in Sam's soul. He felt sorry for Maggie, who ended up on the street through no fault of her own. "You know what? Let's go to my house. I'm sure Mom wouldn't mind. We actually got a new house recently. It's a big one, so there's enough space for everyone," Sam suggested. Henry's invitation immediately brought tears to Maggie's eyes. The woman was so tired of living on the streets that she was ready to live in even a hut made of branches. Taking Maggie by the hand, Sam led her to the nearest bus stop. For some reason, he didn't want to use the subway anymore. Greeting her son in the hallway, Charlotte Green was very surprised when she saw Maggie next to him. "So, this beggar is back in our family. Why does she keep coming back?" the woman thought anxiously. Of course, Mrs. Green wasn't about to speak her mind out loud. Instead, she acted very politely and kindly. "Oh, Maggie, how long has it been? A year? 2? Charlotte asked with feigned enthusiasm. "We haven't seen each other in 3 years, Mrs. Green," Maggie replied timidly. Seeing that the guest was getting uncomfortable, Sam tried to quickly change the subject of the conversation and decided to give Maggie a tour of the house. Moving from room to room, Maggie looked with obvious admiration at the large, spacious rooms, all the renovations and expensive furniture, which she couldn't help but notice. To a woman that grew up in a poor family, Sam's house seemed like a real castle from a fairy tale about Cinderella. All this time, Charlotte Green kept a close eye on the woman, whom she considered a beggar and a fraud. But she could only talk to Sam frankly about it after Maddie went to sleep in the guest room. "Son, why did you bring this beggar into our house? Make her leave. You have a week to get her out. You obviously made a rash decision. After all, you've already dated her before, and it didn't work out. So why stir up the past?" Mrs. Green voiced her concerns. "Mom, Maggie isn't a beggar. She's an orphan. Trust me, these are completely different things," Sam exclaimed, getting irritated. Unfortunately, his words didn't convince Charlotte Green, who had always disliked Maggie. The woman wanted her son to marry a woman from a wealthy family. She was hoping to multiply her late father's capital with the help of her son's successful marriage. To Charlotte's great disappointment, her son didn't share her views and believed that the only reason worth marrying someone for was love. The woman didn't realize that her son had long been in love with Maggie, whom he had liked since school days. "Well, it's okay. I don't think she'll last long in our house," thought Charlotte Green, pursing her lips. Maggie lived in Sam's house for about a month, after which his mother started this unpleasant conversation. Taking advantage of her son's absence, Charlotte Green said, "Listen, honey, it doesn't seem like your relationship with Sam is going to work out, and you're probably aware of the fact that he already has a fiancé," the woman said, putting an emphasis on the last word. "What do you mean he has a fiancé? And what about me and our relationship?" Maggie asked in a trembling voice. "What relationship? Do you even have one? Maybe you did have one a long time ago, but it's all in the past now. So my advice to you is to leave this house. If you need money, I can give you some. You don't have to worry about it. Look, I'm not your enemy here. I understand how hard it is to be an orphan," said Charlotte Green, pretending that she actually cared about Maggie. Maggie looked at the woman with eyes full of tears and then covered her face with their hands and began to cry softly. The idea that Sam could be so cruel to her didn't fit in the woman's head. Dear Lord, he just professed his love to me. How could he be such a hypocrite? One day he's talking about his feelings for me, and the next day he's with some other woman? The woman thought sadly and started packing up the few things she had. Maggie refused to take the money offered by Charlotte Green and left the house with a heavy heart. When Sam came home from work, he saw that his girlfriend was nowhere to be found. "Mom, where's Maggie? Did she go somewhere?" the man asked anxiously. "Son, Maggie is gone forever. She packed up her things and left. She said that she couldn't live under the same roof with me anymore. Can you imagine that? It seems that she might be having an affair. She's clearly been fooling you all this time." Charlotte Green lied without batting an eye. Stunned by the news, Sam sank wearily into the chair and put his head into his hands. "Well, it looks like she betrayed me and chose life on the street instead. And that's after she said that she couldn't live without me," the man thought sadly. Despite the fact that Sam immediately tried to find Maggie, he never managed to do it. Having decided that Maggie must have moved to another city, the man withdrew into himself and plunged into the abyss of depression. From that day on, he deliberately walked through the underpass every day, hoping to see Maggie again. But it was all in vain. To the great chagrin of Charlotte Green, not only did her son not turn his attention to other women, but also started spending all of his free time in his room. "Son, you're too young to just shut down like that. I understand that you had feelings for Maggie, but son, life must go on," Charlotte Green kept repeating. 3 years flew by. Even though Sam seemed to have recovered from his depression, he still couldn't let another woman into his life. Instead, he bought a sports bike and raced through the night streets of the city. Charlotte obviously didn't approve of her son's new hobby, but there was nothing she could do about it. One day, as Sam was maneuvering his bike at high speed, he lost control and crashed it. Fortunately, thanks to the helmet and protective gear, the man managed to avoid serious injuries. However, the ambulance that arrived at the scene still took him to the hospital to get checked out. That was because the man had several deep cuts and abrasions that required medical treatment. Can you imagine Sam's surprise when he got to the emergency room and saw that the on-call nurse was none other than his first love? "Maggie? What are you doing here?" the man exclaimed in surprise. "Well, Sam, I've always wanted to be a nurse, so here I am. As you can see, some dreams do come true," Maggie replied. But Sam wasn't satisfied with this answer. He wanted to know the reason that caused his girlfriend to break up with him. "I don't want to talk about it. I actually have better news for you," Maggie said with a mysterious smile. "What other news? What are you talking about?" the man asked, startled. "You have a son, Sam. He recently turned 2 years old. His name is Kevin, and he has blue eyes and the same dimple on his chin like the one you have," Maggie said with undisguised pride. At that very moment, Sam felt an incredible surge of strength caused by the fact that his life at last had a ray of light. Despite the wounds and abrasions, the man picked up the nurse and twirled her around the room. Covering Maggie's face with kisses, Sam knew that he would never let her go again, no matter what his mother thinks of next. He would do everything in his power to make his family happy.